Taco Bell's new jalapeno citrus salsa with red citrus, real red jalapenos, and guajillo cheese. Usually, you add sauce to the food, but when the sauce is this good, the food is just there. Get the sauce to your mouth. That little quesadilla, not a little quesadilla anymore. Now it's a sauce show. Taco Bell's jalapeno citrus salsa. Get it with any item. You can't eat a chicken. Well, it's here. Participating U.S. Taco Bell locations for a limited time. While supplies last, contact store for availability.
The Neo collection by Ashley Lux was made for making a statement, bringing affordable style to your home's coziest corners. Cool hammered hardware on nightstands and nesters, plush and play seating soften and keep the conversation, and the rich espresso finish that highlights the natural beauty. From quiet mornings to lively gatherings, Neo is here for it all. Shop the Neo collection by Ashley Lux, available now in stores and online at ashley.com/lux.
Okay, let's start. Tziyon Bemihpat Tipadeh, part 3. Look at the summary from yesterday. Okay, summary from yesterday. The Maimon raises 2 questions initially, right? The explanation, which will enable one to understand the verse Tziyon Bemihpat Tipadeh, right? Zion will be redeemed through through judgment, and her captives to charity. Number 1. How is it possible for a person to fulfill the charge of Shulchan Aruch to continue the Torah as a new entity, right? Every day, this is the source of newness, right? And I would compare this to how people generally, perhaps unfortunately, regard the news, right? The news as their source of newness. They cling to it because it's their source of newness, okay? So really, this is how we should regard the Torah. Unfortunately, most people regard it as an old edict, right? As something old-fashioned that we just kind of continually renew. But is not actually new. When in reality, it's the source of newness, right? And the news is nothing new. Okay. B, how will the soul benefit from its descent to this material plane? So the way to answer the first question is by answering this question. How does the soul even benefit from coming down into a body in the first place? So the Maimon began by answering the question through the explanation of the blessing Elokai Neshama, right? My God, the soul which you put into me is pure. In this context, it explains the 2 different expressions of divine light within our souls and within the world at large. A dimension enclosed within the body to give it life, and B, a parallel to the light that is Mamalik Kalman. A level that transcends the body encompasses its parallel in the light is Soviet Kalman. Okay? So within the body, within the soul, within the body, there's 2 dimensions of godliness. There's the enclosed light, which is what we call Mamalik Kalman, that which is invested within the body. And then there's the soul that's transcendent because it can't be invested because it's too great. And that keeps the soul and the body in a kind of joint complex union. Okay? And that hovers from about. That contains from about, not from within, like Mamalik Kalman. It also highlights 3 rungs of the ladder of prayer, right? With prayer, we have three various dimensions. We have Hodah, which is acknowledgement, V'ahavta, which is love. And then we have Bracha, which is blessing. Okay? Hodah is the initial step. That's when you acknowledge you acknowledge that God is and you are not. And then through that, you develop a love relationship. And then through that, you can draw down Bracha, which is drawing down abundance, right? Through the pipeline that you establish or that you reveal. Okay, and through that you can draw godly influence into the world. Now we're gonna get into the second section. Mihine, behold, the way to achieve this fulfillment of the commandment, and you should love God, right? That's the second part of Shema. Is through meditating the verse Shema Yisrael. Okay, so the way to establish the V'ahavta and you should love is through meditating the verse that precedes that, which is Shema Yisrael Shem Elokeinu Shem Echad. As well as Baruch Shem Kohen Malchus Lamed. Right, that those are verses 1 and 2 that precede the paragraph V'ahavta. Right? The Maggid HaMesach asks a simple question: how could there be a commandment to love God? How is it possible to order a person to experience a particular feeling? Right? You can't say feel this. Right? Feelings don't really work like that. Seemingly, feeling is not a deed that can be performed at will. Right? Feeling is a little bit less directed in that way, and it's much more fluid, right? As opposed to action, which can kind of be commanded at the snap of a finger. The Maggid answers that the command to love God follows the commandment of Shema. Shema does not imply merely hearing an idea, but rather contemplating and internalizing. Right? Shema doesn't just mean hear; it means listen. Listen, and listening really means taking disparate parts and integrating them together so that they come to a complete picture within your head. Shema doesn't imply merely hearing an idea, but rather contemplating and internalizing it. Once a person has meditated on the oneness of God, right, the word echad in the Shema, stated in the verse Shema, he will naturally and spontaneously be roused to love God. So we're not saying that we're commanding feelings. We're saying that it's the natural consequence of contemplating the verse in Shema. Listen, Israel, God is one God, right? God is your God. God is our God. And God is one. That should, if you meditate deeply enough and long enough, that should develop a feeling of spontaneous love for God. Okay? As the Alter proceeds to explain, the sages in Pesachim ordain that the recitation of the Shema be coupled with the recitation of the expression Baruch Shem Kohen Malchus Lamed, because meditation upon this theme contributes fundamental concepts that arouse one's love for God. Okay, so they added additional verse to help, again, spur this feeling of love. For this reason, these verses precede the command to love God in the recitation of the Shema. Okay, Perish, to explain. Creation involves bringing existence, yesh, into being, right, yesh me'ayin, from absolute nothingness. As reflected by the expression, blessed be the name of the glorious kingdom forever and ever. This means that God's kingship, the quality that causes him to be called king over the creation beings, and is thus not his essential dimension. One is a king over others. There is no concept of kingship with regard to one's own self, right? You don't have the concept of kingship as it pertains to you. Kingship is really your most external dimension because it pertains to how you interact with things outside of you. In other words, kingship does not reflect a person's character, who he is or what he himself thinks or feels, but rather how one can manifest his authority over others. Similarly, in the analog, God's kingship does not reflect how he exists for himself, as it were, but how he manifests his sovereignty in creation. Right? So when we talk about God's malchus, we're not talking about how God is unto himself. We're talking about how he interacts with creation. Thus, malchus, kingship, is the aspect of godliness which predicates the creation of beings that feel independent, right? This idea of a yesh, a something, separate from all else. And this conveys vitality to all higher spiritual realms. Thus, it is said, your kingship is kingship over all the worlds. Your dominion is in every generation. Your dominion reflects a lower level than kingship. It implies imposing one's rule by force against the will of his subjects. There are two dimensions to God's sovereignty: his kingship and his dominion. Okay? We might say his kingship and his sovereignty, right? There's the kingship, which is like the internal dimension of this lower aspect, and then there's the sovereignty, which is how it manifests it with the creations, with things outside of himself. The term kingship indicates that the people voluntarily agree to a king's authority, as indicated by the phrase from the liturgy. They accept his kingship willingly. Dominion, by contrast, is imposed by force, regardless of the subject's consent. Okay, so one is more of a natural relationship where you enter into consent, and the other one is where you might say a tyrannical government, where there's a force imposition. Thus, God's kingship is the source for the creation of the higher realms, where his sovereignty is willingly accepted, and his dominion is the source of the creation of the lower realms, where the created beings do not consciously accept his sovereignty, and it's imposed upon them. Okay. Okay, this quality, the external dimension of his attribute of kingship, is present in every generation. This includes generations that were wicked, like the generation of the flood, and did not accept his kingship willingly. Even so, abundant vitality was drawn down to them and from an attribute of your dominion. Okay, so whether or not the creations agree and consent to God's kingship, they're still receiving from him. Behold, all the higher spiritual realms, the lower Garden of Eden, literally Garden of Eden, in this context, the term refers to the afterlife, the spiritual realm where their souls enjoy the reward for their observance of Torah mitzvahs. There are myriad levels with the general category. In general, two fundamental divisions are made. The lower Garden of Eden, to which entered the soul's primarily motivation for divine service was emotional, right? They were primarily motivated for emotional reasons. And the higher Garden of Eden, to which the soul's primary motivation was intellectual, meaning they overrode their natural inclinations and they were able to somewhat change their nature through intellectual cogitation, etc., which represents a level of pleasure far more wondrous than the delights of the world, as our sages state. Right? And the proof of this is with Acher, Elisha ben Nevuya, where Rabbi Meir and the other sages prayed and decided that it's preferable for him to be judged and go through, right, all the punishment of Gehenna in order for him to experience the world to come. Okay, so we'll just touch on this in a broad scope. Acher, also known as Rabbi Elisha ben Nevuya, was the Rebbe of Rabbi Meir, was a great scholar, but had committed many severe transgressions. Hence, after his death, right, he was one of the four who went into the Pardes with Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Akiva, again, was the only one who went in peace and came out in peace. The other ones all had problems after they came out, primarily because of the way they went in. Hence, after his death, a heavenly voice declared that rather than undergo the harsh punishments of Gehenna, necessary to purify himself before he could receive a portion of the world to come, it would be preferable for him to forego both the punishments and the eternal reward. Rabbi Meir, his colleague and student, however, maintained that it was preferable for him to be judged so that he would ultimately receive the spiritual reward. Chassidus explains that from Rabbi Meir's words, it can be inferred that the pleasures of even the lower Garden of Eden are so great that it was worth undergoing all this suffering and Gehenna to receive them. The higher Garden of Eden, and indeed an infinite number of higher levels, were brought into being from God's kingship. For that reason, the creation is described as being brought into existence, yesh ma'an, something from nothing. For the created beings are brought into existence from the quality and attribute of malchus, an attribute which is like nothingness and non-entity, it being no more than a radiance and a glimmer from God. So we're saying of the lowest dimension of God, this is only a reflection of that. And this creates this infinite gradations of infinite pleasure, etc., etc. And there's a fundamental difference between malchus and the other spheres. The other spheres parallel from the source for the qualities like intellect or emotion that tell us something of who the person is. Hence, these qualities are described as being of substance. By contrast, as mentioned above, malchus does not communicate the person's inner qualities. It only shows his ability to motivate others to accept his authority. Right? Malchus is only your ability to speak, your ability to communicate, your external dimension, your levushim, things you take on and put off. But they don't say anything about who you fundamentally are. By contrast, as mentioned above, malchus does not communicate to the person's inner qualities. It only shows his ability to motivate others to accept his authority. The projection of his authority over others involves merely a glimmer of his personality. His energy is invested, but not in a manner which reveals who he is. Therefore, it is associated with nothingness. The term glimmer is used because, unlike light, which reveals the qualities of source of light, from the light one can describe the qualities of that source. Right? You can infer, you can deduce the source from the light that it gives off. From the light, one can describe the qualities of the source. A glimmer does not reveal the qualities of its source, only the fact that the source exists. Okay? So you know that there's something that's glistening or glimmering, but you don't really know much about it. That's the level of malchus. Similarly, unlike other spheres, malchus does not manifest any of God's qualities. It is merely a glimmer, an external dimension of his light. Right? You can say things that are vastly different from who you fundamentally are. In fact, most of the things we say are different from what we fundamentally are. Moreover, even the influence from malchus does not enclose itself within the inner dimensions of the created beings. Instead, it rests over them from above in an encompassing manner. To refer to the analog of a kingship, the king's name, a person's name also does not reflect the nature of his character traits. Who he is for himself, it is only necessary in the context of a person's relations with others. Right? You only have a name when you need to call somebody, when you need to elicit somebody. Yes, it contains their entire being, but the name itself isn't anything. If I write down your name and then I erase it, I don't affect you in any way. It is only necessary in the context of a person's relations with others. Thus, it shares parallels with the attribute of malchus. So malchus is associated with names, right? Calling out, speaking, etc., etc. Superficial, encompassing dimensions of a person. It's called over his kingship. There are two ways in which a king controls his kingdom. Right? He ordains laws under which the country lives, and in that way controls the day-to-day functioning of the country. And B, he projects a general identity. The populace know that they are members of this and this country. Right? He gives them an identity. So one is there's laws that he puts into place, and the other one is he gives them an identity, a general zeitgeist. The first aspect rule relates to the king's inner qualities, his thoughts and his feelings. The second merely to his name. Most of the members of the kingdom know little of how the king runs his kingdom and what goes into his decision making. They relate only to his name, the general identity he protects, right? We live in such and such a state. We live in the Sunshine State under Governor Ron DeSantis, right? Or who's the governor in New Jersey? Nikki Sherrill, is that her name? All of this that he created beings have their source in mere ray of godliness. However, applies to the light that maintains the spiritual cosmos. I say there's Starsos. The chain link order, the framework of spiritual words that lowers the divine life energy level after level until it can be enclosed in a material world, and brings the entire brings the sublime spiritual world into being. In this material world, by contrast, it is possible to draw down the revelation of the actual essence of the Ein Sof. Our sages state that the God desired a dwelling in the lower worlds. This desire emanates from his very essence, a level that transcends all his revealed qualities. It is through teshuva and good deeds that the desire is consummated. Through teshuva and good deeds, right? This is from Pirkei Avos 4:17. I stated in Pirkei Avos 4:17, 1 hour of teshuva and good deeds in this world surpasses the entire life of the world to come. A person should also be conscious that in the world to come, it is only possible to ascend in a measured way. Through purification via the Kafakela, right? In the world to come, you have to go step by step in a gradual ascent. You can't do any radical shifts in the world to come. The hollow of the slingshot, a state of ceaseless unrest after death in which the soul is hurled alternately from peaks of awareness. Okay? Also known as purgatory. The soul ascends to the lower guardian through immersion in the river of fire. This term, first found in Daniel 7:10, is used in the Zohar to refer to a purification process that enables the soul to ascend from a lower level of Gan Ein to a higher level. Just as on the earthly plane, immersion in a mikvah is a process of purification, so too in the spiritual realms, immersion in the river of fire cleanses the soul of worldly memories and makes it fit to receive more refined levels of awareness. It ascends to a higher level of Garden and Eden. At every level, soul receives a measure of divine light according to the judgment appropriate for it. A person's position in the afterlife reflects the level of his divine service in this world. His sins determine the nature of his punishment he will receive, and the mitzvahs he performs and the Torah he studies determine the quality of the divine light that will be revealed to him. This is because the spiritual realms receive their vitality from the divine light that is mamale kol almin, right? The light that is invested within. In this material world, as will be stated, since there is a ray of God's light that is soiviv kol almin, i.e., the unlimited potential manifest in this world, there's a possibility for the ascent that has no constraints. I.e., we're able to draw down God's essence, which is almost like a hack found in this world. By contrast, a person can change his spiritual level radically and immediately from one extreme to another. Right? You can literally change like that as soon as you decide to. This concept finds expression in Torah law. If a man consecrates a woman on the condition that he is completely righteous, she is consecrated, even if he is known to be utterly wicked. The rationale is that at the time of the consecration, perhaps he had thoughts of teshuva, and at that moment, he was perfectly righteous. Right? And in one moment, teshuva would wipe away all of a person's sins and indeed transform them into merits, says the Gemara. This radical transformation is possible because a ray of God's light that is soviv kalmin and thus beyond limitation is present in the material world. Right? And through the greatest darkness, you can elicit the greatest light as well. Our material world also derives its vitality from God's light that is mamale kalmin. As applied by the sage's statement, there's no blade of grass on this plane that does not have a mazel above it that strikes it and makes it grow. Nevertheless, in addition to these influences which define the character of the different created beings, God's infinite light that is soviv kalmin is invested in this world, as the Alter Rebbe proceeds to explain. For this reason, because a person's service of Torah and mitzvos in this world draws down an unlimited light, our sages state, 1 hour of teshuva and good deeds in this world surpasses the entire life of the world to come. For as explained above, the world to come is limited, representing a quality of divine light that appropriate to a soul's particular level of refinement, right? It's measure for measure. While the observance of Torah and mitzvos in this world relate to God's essence, and as such taps an unlimited potential. This is huge news. This is literally the source of news, of newness. This is also the meaning of the verse, which states the divine retribution will come because you did not serve God, your Lord, out of encompassing kol, abundance. Kol is 50, right? The 50th level, which is the transcendent dimension of mind, of bina. This refers to the higher levels of revelation afforded by observance of the Torah mitzvahs in this material plane, which surpasses the revelation of the world to come, that are called kol, encompassing. See Bava Basra and Likutei Torah Bamidbar, which identifies kol numerically equivalent to 50, the 50 gates of wisdom that enable the soul to attain the awareness of God in the world to come. The awareness of the above concept should evoke love for God with all your soul, to the point that sacrificing not merely the body but also the soul, the the ultimate purpose is to draw down God's infinite encompassing light that is so common into this lowly plane. This is accomplished through the Torah and its mitzvahs. For the Torah relates to God as he exists for himself, as it were above the limited light which brings creation into being. This is intimated by the verse and these words which I command you today. The verse highlights how I, i.e. I who I am, which states, right, and this is from the Zohar, which states that this refers to God as the sublime unknown, his essence, which transcends all capacity, right? The Yesh HaMiti, the true essence, the true essential being, commands and connects. The word mitzvah is related to the word tzavsa, meaning connection. With the person observing the mitzvah, through observing the mitzvahs, we connect to God's essence and not merely to the name of his glorious kingdom, right? Which is what we connect to in the next world, in Gan Eden, through the infinite pleasure you experience, whether it's the lower Gan Eden or the higher Gan Eden. This connection is established today in this world and not tomorrow in the world to come, whose purpose is only for receiving a reward. This should get you excited. If you understand what we just said, this should get you excited. Right? When you contemplate, Asher Anochi Mitzavcha Hayom, right? Which I command you today, which I connect you today. I connect you to the essence today. You don't have to wait till tomorrow. You can do it right here, right now. The reward for the observance of the mitzvahs in the world to come reflects the pleasure and satisfaction of a created being, while the pleasure and satisfaction of God comes, as it were, from the actual performance in the mitzvahs. Since there's no comparison between a created being and a creator, it is clear that the entire life of the world to come, the satisfaction experienced by mortals, cannot be compared to the teshuva and good deeds in this world, the satisfaction experienced by the creator. Okay. When one contemplates this, the words of the Torah will be new in his eyes every day. Since we live in a world defined by time and space, it is seemingly against our nature to regard the Torah as new at all times, right? Because the Torah is old. It seems old to us. By dint of the fact that we live in a world of limitation. Simply put, having studied the Torah on the previous day, how can one regard it as new today? I just studied it yesterday. That's old. That's not new. When, however, a person becomes aware of the essential godliness that is manifest through the Torah, he will continually view it with excitement with which one contemplates a new entity. Because today, in this world, he can draw down God's essence through the observance of the mitzvahs. This is not true tomorrow in the world to come. Therefore, the 248 mitzvahs are referred to as 248 limbs and 248 different means of drawing down the sublime will. To develop the analogy, a limb has nerves running to it from the brain, which motivate the limb to move as a person desires. Right? There's the limb has somewhat of a shortcut, a shortcut, a hack in it, right? Where it can be fast tracked from the will, from the brain. Some of the mitzvahs convey God's influence from its root source and actualization in the physical world. Through the nerves, the limbs bring about the expression of a person's desires. Similarly, the mitzvahs manifest God's influence on this world. This inspires the fulfillment of the commandment, and you should love Hashem L'kecha, your God, your Lord. Hashem L'kecha, God, your Lord. By arousing love for God, we cause Hashem, right, the name Havaya, the aspect of godliness that transcends nature, to become Elokecha, your strength and your vitality. God's name Elohim, which appears in the possessive form, Elokecha, translates as your Lord in the above verse, associated with godly power and life force that encloses itself in every entity to endow it with vitality. Enabling the love for God to be with all your heart, interpreted by our sages as being with both your hearts. That there will be a revelation of godliness in both ventricles of the heart. A person's left ventricle, associated with the animal soul and material desires, will be filled with bitterness over being sunk in concern for the matters of the material world and being distant from God. Right? This is called spiritual ambivalence. And his right ventricle will be filled with happiness associated with the observance of mitzvahs, as is written, Israel will rejoice in its maker. This refers to the mitzvahs that are enclosed in the deed. The more that one will feel bitter about his lack of spiritual focus, the more forcefully will be felt the happiness from the revelation of God's infinite light through the observance of the mitzvahs. The concept that he is able to draw down God's infinite light through this deed will infuse him with joy. Even though this divine light is not revealed at present, it will be revealed in the future in the era of Mashiach. This is intimated by the saying, he sows righteousness and causes deliverance, Yeshuas, to sprout forth. The root of Yeshuas is Yesha. As in the verse, and God turned, right? Like Sha'ashua. Like a game, turning towards or turning towards. See Igar Sakodesh, which explains that this relates to drawing down divine life force. This relates to 375 lights will be revealed at that time. Tanya mentions 370 lights, which is also the wording of the Zohar. Concept of 370 lights is found in several places of Chassidus, as explained in Shar HaKdamus, Perek Be'arkei, Hakinuim B'Shem Ban. to describe by analogy, this is like a person who owns a chest filled with jewels and pearls. He takes joy in them, even though he does not see them because they are stored away in the chest. Similarly, the knowledge of godly energy is being drawn down through the observance of the mitzvos. Should bring us happiness, even though that godliness is not revealed at present. Right? You can be excited about something without it being revealed. And just knowing it's occurring is enough to make you excited. Okay, so we'll stop here for today. Yitzch'k.